Welcome to the Glass House. We are so pumped to have one of our top authors on the show, Jen Wilkin. Aren't you?
Yes, I just can't.
Did you see how I was using my head to emphasize how I feel?
We are so pumped.
I am super caffeinated and super excited about this.
Okay.
But even better, we have Jen's better half, Jeff, on video here today. So welcome, guys, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's exciting.
So what we wanted to do, obviously, Jen, we are excited about your Revelation study coming out. I wanted to ask you a quick question about that before we jump into this conversation with Jeff. But like, John Calvin could not write a commentary on Revelation because he could not understand it. So how did you do this?
I totally understand the whole book. I just want everyone to know that.
You finally decoded it.
Yeah. No, for me, it was a logical next step. I did still have to be talked into it, but it was a logical next step based on the other studies that I had written. I had written Genesis and Exodus.
Yeah.
And if you've written the beginning of the story, then you're really set up to learn your way through the end of the story and make the connections between those two sections of scripture. And so I had some friends who helped me see that if anyone was going to do it, it should be the person who had spent a lot of time in Genesis and Exodus.
Yeah.
And it was a huge help.
It's such an intimidating book. I remember preaching in it and just feeling so humbled. Like, you have to make decisive choices at the beginning of the book on how you're going to interpret it.
Yep. And you have to be really clear up front about it.
Jen, one of the things about writing is it's such a tedious craft to sit down and focus and write. Was Revelation harder than the other ones?
I think it was harder in the sense that I had pretty much a lot of the typical baggage that people my age have around reading it. You know, I grew up with a certain set of movies and a certain set of views on the book that made it terrifying to me. And then it also felt impenetrable. I thought, I'm not seminary trained. I mean, how am I supposed to tackle books that John Calvin didn't even want to tackle? And then the more I got into it, the more I started realizing that the work I have done with developing a sense of biblical theology, being able to trace a theme from the beginning to the end of scripture, that this book was actually more accessible than I had been led to believe. And so I think it was hard in the sense that I was having to swat down my own set of fears or insecurities. But I think that's what I'm going to ask students to do too, is just say, hey, I know how you feel, because that's exactly how I have felt. And we don't have to understand this book you don't have to understand every single thing about it to be able to have enough tools to understand it sufficiently for it to give us the encouragement and the exhortation that it contains.
I want to ask you this. Many people feel like Revelation is highly cerebral, very confusing. Mm-hmm. I'd rather stay in the Psalms, or I'd rather be in the book of James that has real practical application. What would motivate a woman to want to pick up Revelation? In what ways is it more practical than people think?
Well, what's funny is when I was working on the study, I asked my Instagram followers, what do you think is the scariest book of the Bible or most intimidating? And overwhelmingly, people responded Revelation. And I said, what do you think is the most encouraging book of the Bible? And overwhelmingly, people responded the Psalms. And to which I'm like, well, you're not reading all of the Psalms then.
Right.
You're picking the ones that are, that you find encouraging. And yet here's Revelation that is intended to be an encouragement to us. Who doesn't want encouragement? And I think sometimes we look at things in the Bible that aren't actually meant to encourage. We take them out of context. But this entire book is telling us something about enduring. And I think we live in an instant gratification age. I don't think that. I know that that's true. And so I think often when we think about the end of all things, we have an escapist mentality instead of an endurance mentality. And so we really need to be able to read this book the way that the original hearers of it would have heard it, as far as that's possible for us. They heard it read aloud, and they took encouragement from it just by sitting and hearing it. And so that's a lot of what I'm hoping that people who do the study can do, is maybe sort of simplify the way that you're thinking about this book. Instead of zooming in, zoom out a little bit. Give yourself permission to let it wash over you a little bit more.
Do you have lots of opinions about the covers of your books or studies?
I feel like you might have insider information about this.
I have found
Yes.
authors to be very opinionated about what the cover looks like. Are you one
Yeah.
of those? Or
Wouldn't you?
do you just say you guys do whatever you want?
I do not say that.
No, you do not.
I do not.
So you
say
do have, I mean, I personally would have a lot of opinions about something that was going to artistically represent all the work of the content I put together.
Yes, yes. And I think once you have been shown a bad cover, you develop a lot of feelings about having a good cover.
Very good.
But I love the covers that I have out there.
Awesome.
currently.
Do you like the cover of Revelation?
I love it because it's my favorite. It's the kind where you look at it, you go, oh, that's really pretty. And then as you're doing the study, you go, oh, that was on purpose.
Jen, as you were writing this study, did you have a way to teach that in your local context?
Yeah, I did. It was really fun. We gathered some women who have done my studies for a long time and who I knew would be not threatened to give, direct feedback to me. Jeff sat in and we did it in the dining room. And so they would come and I taught 2 sessions each week. And so it was intense. I mean, it was like, because I didn't want to ask them to commit to the full 10 weeks just based on the timeline that I was working with. And so we would power through 2 weeks of homework and then 2 weeks of teaching. And then they would basically critique it after I taught and say, I heard you say this. Is this what you meant? Or this didn't make any sense at all. And I can't wait for that group to get to hear the final product because I was like, this is hard. And they saw all of the logic get worked out and all of the.
But it was so good.
I have a hard time believing it because after I had to go back and listen to all of those and I was like, they're being nice to me.
That's good. Well, I know one thing everyone out there is wanting to know, Jen, is who is the Antichrist? Could you just go ahead and maybe give us a little teaser?
No.
When does the study come out and where can people find it?
It comes out July 1st, and you can find it wherever books and Bible studies are sold. You can find it at Lifeway, obviously, lifeway.com. You can also find it on Amazon.
Awesome.
Wait, so is Leviticus next?
Oh, yeah. I mean, why not?
Yeah, now you've done Revelation. Leviticus seems very practical.
I mean, you said you did Genesis and Exodus, so keep going.
That's good.
Yeah, I think maybe Lamentations is up.
I was hoping you and Jeff could do the Song of Solomon together.
Oh, yeah.
That's been done.
Yeah.
All right, so this show is about, we thought, we often interview pastors' wives about what is it like to support your husband in ministry, but we don't talk about the other side, that there are a large number of women on staff at churches where their husband is a marketplace ministry or he's not on staff, but he's supporting her.
Correct.
And we recently had dinner with Jen, and she was telling us about how their marriage operates. And so we thought this would be a fun conversation to have them on and talk about that. So why don't the two of you start by giving us just a few highlights of your ministry story and kind of how you ended up here?
Well, we kind of met doing ministry.
That's
We
true.
were students at Texas A&M, and we both volunteered with the high school students in that ministry, and really served together for well over a year before we ever dated or anything. And I really think that was. It's a unique part of our story. We always say it's important to be friends before you are, first before you're dating. And so that being a ministry context obviously helped really set, oh yeah, this is the kind of person that I would want to hang out with for a while.
Just real quick, for the sake of Aggie Nation out there, is there anything you guys want to say? Just quick shout out. I know you people.
Oh yeah.
We're fine.
Yeah.
There was no whoop in there or
I mean,
anything.
we can add
we're,
one.
We're playing it cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. You're the most chill
Chill.
Aggies I know.
It's like
No,
a chill
we-
morning.
We love it.
Are you wearing your Aggie rings today?
Yeah.
Of
Yeah,
course
oh,
they
there they
are.
are.
Yeah, we're chill, but we got the jewelry.
Both have it on.
Standard issue.
Yeah.
No, but we do joke when we first got married. We were like, I think I would be better. It would be easier for me to lose my wedding ring than
With
my Aggie ring.
Yes. Jeff is always with me, but my Aggie ring,
Yeah.
We were like, if the house burns down, what one thing would you want to go grab? And we were both like, our Aggie rings. So that's normal.
Not the kids' pictures or anything like that.
That's
Well,
so
we didn't
awesome.
have kids at the time.
Okay.
But, yeah.
But
Well-
still.
Thought, yeah.
One of Lynley's best friends here is an Aggie, and so we hear about it all the
Oh,
time.
Yeah.
yeah. And
so-
and sometimes she doesn't have her wedding ring on, but she has that on. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So keep going. So
Yeah.
you met and kind of doing ministry, and then where to go?
Well, can I tell about early on in our dating relationship? Jeff was like the most spiritual kid in Methodist youth group, and so he had been encouraged to go to seminary. And when we first started dating, he was about to go visit, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is not going to be a good pastor's wife." And so I told myself, I'm like, if he decides to go to seminary, I probably won't be
Game
dating
over.
him. Yeah, and then he ended up changing his mind. I don't think it was related to dating me. I think it was just like, no, I don't think this is what I want to do. And so he did IT consulting for years and years. And then ironically ended up being married to the person who went into ministry.
Wow.
Neither of us ever were
So
thinking that was gonna
IT
happen.
literally saved your marriage.
Yeah, and actually in many ways.
I bet Lynley's interested in this. Like, why did you not see yourself as a pastor's wife?
Well, I think we all know why. I don't have the right personality for it in terms of what is the accepted version of pastor's wife, and it's been honestly, just as a woman serving in the church, it's been challenging at times to have a personality type that people don't associate with the words quiet and gentle spirit, and so I just thought
Meek and mild.
I thought I'm more likely to be a liability to him as a pastor's wife than an asset, just based on my own understanding of my personality. And this is, of course, when I'm 24 years old. So.
Okay, I ask this sometimes because everybody always gets this right. When you were growing up thinking about, I can't be a pastor's wife because I don't do A and B. What are those two things?
I don't bake very much, and I don't seek out conversations with women.
Oh, no.
You didn't include play the piano.
It's sing and play the piano.
Oh, yeah.
Sing and play
Everyone's
the
like,
piano.
I don't sing and play the piano, but those were good too. You don't like conversation.
I do actually sing and play the piano. So
Oh, you do?
badly. I play the piano badly.
Okay, well then.
She sings with a lovely voice.
Oh,
Thanks, man.
okay.
Jen, I just have to say that's impressive self-awareness for a person in her 20s to already know that about herself, that she should not be a pastor's wife. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, there was a longer list of things I shouldn't be, but that was one of them. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so tell us a little bit about how your ministry took off, because how did you become the speaker, writer person? Like, it appears it just happened out of nowhere. I know it was a process. Hold on. Lynley wants to ask a question first.
Wait, we bypassed the personality a little bit.
Okay.
Just tell the audience who's listening a little bit about the dynamic of your relationship, of just your personalities, how they mesh together, how they can be challenging, all that.
And I think we're pretty similar.
Yeah.
Like we have seen things eye to eye really well, and so it's like we have always had trouble counseling couples because it's like we just don't have big fight seasons.
Don't come to us for marriage counseling.
Because it's like there were not seasons where we didn't want to be together.
Yeah.
Just in general, though, I was thinking about this question, and I'm more of the glass half empty kind of guy, and she's more the glass half full kind of person. So if there's any, it's like, how do we think about? She calls me Johnny Raincloud, because I'm always
Lovingly.
No, I call Lynley my dream squasher.
Lovingly.
Lovingly.
Yeah.
I have the dream, she squashes it.
No, I have reality. I'm like, I know reality. It's not going to happen.
I'm like, if you set the bar down here,
See?
then you can always be.
He's managing expectations
Then you
all
can
the time.
always
Very
be,
good.
no matter what happens.
I
You're
say
either
this
meeting
about-
expectations or exceeding them.
Every person we meet, I'm like, if you just have low expectations, then they just really surprise you.
Oh.
And then if they
What
don't,
a terrible way to live
It's
your
terrible.
life. Really?
Yeah,
I didn't even know I was an optimist until I hung out with him.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm pretty positive. Yeah.
wow, that's great.
Okay, so that's one way you're different, but you're mostly like, you guys see things eye to eye.
Yeah, we think about the world kind of the same way. We've thought about how we spend our money and what's important and all that.
Very
Kind of
good.
the same way. Parenting.
Just a ton of overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've said sometimes that I feel like I've had a difficult relationship with the local church, and that having an easy marriage has been a gift. Like, we don't have a ton of relational strain, and so I feel like it's given actually both of us more opportunity to invest in hard things, because we didn't have hard things in our marriage. So we feel actually really grateful for that.
That's awesome.
We're both quiet.
Yeah, Lynley and I can't even remember last time we argued.
It was yesterday.
Yeah, it was pretty much yesterday.
All right. Moving on.
Yeah. We love how spiritual and sweet and harmonious your marriage is.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's because we're holy. It's not because, personalities. Yeah.
So getting to the topic of, at some point, Jen, your career, your calling really went to a new level beyond just teaching women at the church. You began to have, for a better word, a platform.
Mm-hmm.
How did that affect your marriage? How did you guys begin to deal with that?
Well, honestly, I was in my mid 40s by the time all of that started to happen. And we had been serving in a local church, in large local churches. The church we were at when we lived in Houston was a big church. And so I had a platform in the sense that, I was recognized in the community and whatever, because I'd been teaching or leading in a large church. And so when things started to happen, like with just the whole rise of social media and all of that, I think I didn't care about it the way that I would have if I hadn't already had some exposure to people trying to make me more awesome than I actually was, that kind of stuff. And then I was at a church where you get inoculated against Christian celebrity because, we had people at the village, we would have church vans pull up on Sunday morning and drop off their student ministry to listen to Matt preach. And that just, you watch enough of that and you're like, this is weird, And so by the time I started to have a broader listenership or whatever you want to call it, there wasn't a shine to it. And I was in middle age. And I think what it was going to potentially cost our family in terms of like being overexposed, we just weren't going to do it. It just, those things just, I think, stayed in a good column.
Well, and I think they took off, like, I think you were more recognized outside of our local spaces.
For sure.
So even, when we're at our home church or whatever, Matt's the biggest fish in that pond.
People don't think of me as a celebrity.
Jen's just that woman who's on staff that does, whatever you were doing at the time.
Mm-hmm. Most of them. I mean, I stepped down from my role at the church in September, and most of the people at the church had no idea that I was not just doing the Bible study stuff for women.
Got it.
And it was kind of great. And I would have, women will come up to me at the local study and go, my friend is doing your Bible study at her church in Florida. It's like, well, I'm glad. That's great. I mean, they're not tuned in. And I loved that because it meant that in my local church, I didn't have to be anything more than just me.
What were your roles in the local church? I know that you talked about stepping down in September. Before that.
Yeah. So in Houston, I was the women's ministry director part-time, had very tiny children at the time. Did that for 5 years and then moved up here to the Dallas area. And my home church didn't have women's ministry. And so I taught in my living room and then eventually took a job. It's funny when I think about it now. I took a job on staff part-time hourly on the communications team because Jeff was like, hey, we're going to have a lot of kids in college at the same time. Can you do literally anything that brings in any amount of money? And so I made $12.50 an hour. And I would go to Target on my lunch break and see a shirt and go, that's 2 hours of work. I'm not buying that. Simpler times. Jeff is like, and now. So I did that part-time and then eventually became the blog editor when we had a blog. And then when JT English was hired at the church in 2017, I think it was, he brought Christian education, adult Christian education into the church. And he asked me if I would mind bringing my Bible study back into the local church we were meeting across the street at a Methodist church.
I have a question, a follow-up question real quick. So earlier you said one of the things that was hard is that you don't like to strike up conversations with women. And then you're the women's minister. But I actually love that because like I served as a kids director, but I'm not good on stage. I'm not a bubbly personality. I think it can work in certain formats. So how did you grow it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could call it an occupational hazard, right? If you're doing women's ministry, but then some of it was that I grew up with 4 brothers, and I've always had easy friendships with men. And so then, and the female space it's women's relationships tend to be more complicated. They have more levels to them than if you have a relationship, a male friend. And so I think I just thought I'll just stick to what's easy and feels comfortable. And then learning over time to enjoy and invest in female relationships has been one of the greatest gifts, I think, of serving in the all female spaces. I have dear friends, and that was not really, I might have one or two female friends, growing up or in college, but so that's been a real fun upside to it.
Jeff, can I ask you a question? I think as a man in the house, I struggle a lot with insecurity about, am I leading my family well? I feel like it's much harder to lead at home than it is at the workplace. My teenagers are not that into me. They don't like hearing my voice for an extended period of time. So did you battle insecurity? Like, as Jen became this very well-known teacher, people line up to hear her. Did you battle insecurity of like, I'm just this rotten spiritual leader at home. I'm married to this rock star wife. Were there any of that?
No, not really. And I think some of it is, to Jen's point, is like our kids were like, our oldest was in college. And so our kids are like 4 years apart.
I
So
see.
we had high school and college before you even published your first book. And so, just all of that wasn't a piece of it. Actually, there was a lot of benefits to it, because as we grew in the Lord and were discipled, we did a lot of that stuff together. And so we're struggling with hard doctrines and hard passages, and it was things that we talked about together. And we talked about that just as a strategy for parents. It's like, you need to be talking about the Lord in front of your kids
with each other,
not necessarily directed to them. So there's just a lot of conversations like, this is what we talk about as people. And so there was just so much of us growing and being discipled that was happening together. And Jen just had I've done children's ministry for 20 years, and Jen's platform was women. And so those things have come out just in different ways in our ministries. But just a lot of shared language and communication and learning and struggling over things together in the family. So it didn't feel like I was having to battle anything, because we were working it all out together.
That's great.
But also, I will say this is one of my favorite things about Jeff, and he denies it, but he is probably the most unself-conscious person I know. He's someone, he does the right thing for the right reason. He doesn't need not that we all need recognition of what we're doing to some degree, but I feel like you need it way less than me and other people. And so he just is not, and it's one of the reasons, that I married you, because you weren't threatened by me. You didn't see me as like,
oh, I get really excited. Like,
yeah.
And there were years where she was traveling and I didn't get to go. And as the kids are all adults now, I've gotten to travel with you.
He's like, I want to come.
And it's like,
you want to come to a women's conference?
That's my wife. Yeah. You're talking to my wife.
That's awesome.
It's cool. It's fun. I cheer for her, and it's really fun.
How do you feel sitting in a room full of women?
I feel fine, because I know she's gonna knock it out of the park, and she's probably gonna point me out at some point, and I'm just. It's great.
He's probably heard what I'm going to say before I teach it. Because if anything, the books, all of it, Revelation study, he sat in the dining room while I taught it and provided feedback that others might not have been willing to offer. Like he's a truth teller. That's a role that he's played in our relationship. He's not afraid of me, right? Which means not only that he has celebrated things about me that others might have found threatening, but it also means he'll call me out on things that other people
That's
might
great.
not. So, yeah.
Jen, it bothers me when my family is listening to me preach or speak, and they've heard it before. Does it bother you?
Well, my family doesn't hear me that often.
Okay.
If you think about it, the girls have done women's Bible study, and then the kids, probably the most they've heard me would be listening to Knowing Faith, to the podcast, because most or some, or at some point, all of them have listened to parts of it. but they've heard me repeat myself for years. So what's new?
I think that I'm really enjoying just you guys talking about how there's really no jealousy or envy between you two. I think that's really sweet. That's such a
Well, if he ever wants to try to do women's ministry,
Right.
I might get super
well,
jealous.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
true. I know. I'm
Or
just
you in
saying, like,
children's ministry.
Yeah.
oh,
They
Don't
want
put
me.
Yeah.
Jen in
They
children.
won't. They won't. I wouldn't.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's never been a threat.
Yeah.
Like we've always felt
No.
safe in our own
Yeah.
spaces.
I'm
So
like,
it's
do
good.
I have time to break their wills while I'm in there?
Yeah.
Or don't-
She loves our children.
yes. And
Yeah.
the children of close friends.
Very good.
I'm the same way. Okay, but my question is, you guys are older, you've been married for a long time, you've gone through, I mean, it sounds like really good seasons, but if you were talking to a married couple out there who is maybe struggling because one of their ministries seems to be thriving more than the others, I mean, how do you talk to them about just celebration of the other person versus envy?
I mean, you got to ask what's underlying that. I mean, it's not about the ministry if that's the way you're feeling. It's not about, there's something else going on there. There's some insecurity in the relationship that is going to flare up no matter what the comparison point is. It's not about the ministry. But again, don't ask us marriage advice. We're not great with it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think it's be a cheerleader for your spouse and be on board with whatever is happening. And so so when the season is hard for your spouse, you're like, you're doing what the Lord has called you to do. Or you have hard conversations about, is this what I want to do? And so it ends up being something if you approach it as we're doing this together, even though this is your ministry and this is my ministry, and I'm going to cheer you on. I'm going to support you as best you can. And you're going to do the same for me.
When it's my turn.
When it's your turn, because there's definitely been hard seasons for both of us.
Yeah. It's so important to feel like your
We're
spouse
fine,
is
though. It's all fine.
Yeah, sure. This feels like really healthy repression. Jen, I asked you this at One Lifeway, but I want to ask you again. There's a lot of girls out there who are probably like Jen Wilkin groupies that want to be like you one day. And the question is, like, if there's a gal out there who feels called to be a different kind of church leader, who wants to teach, who wants to use her gifts, what do you say to that young girl?
I say, where are you currently serving? Because people who have a calling, in my experience, don't wait to be asked to do that thing. They find ways to do it. And they may not even realize that they've already started doing it. That was certainly the case with me. Like, people will say, describe your call to ministry. And I'm like, it's all hindsight for me. I never thought I was going to be doing this. And so I can look over my shoulder and go, oh, that was leading to the next thing that was leading to the next thing. But I wasn't trying to like maneuver makes it sound calculating. I don't think people who have a forward looking call are being calculating, but I was not mapping out a way to get from point A to point B. I was moving toward opportunities in the local church that I felt needed to be filled. And for me, it's because of my personality, it's typically a justice issue. It's like, why are we not doing this? That's very wrong. People should be punished for not doing this. So I'm going to go do that. It's a little heavy handed. And so, for women who sense this calling, I would say, what are you doing? Like, look around and see where you've already been serving, and then what needs to be done, and go do it. Because right now, a lot of people only want to do the thing that will garner attention, because they're being told, like, you can't publish if you don't have a platform of a certain size. But for me, like, a lot of the reason that I think we haven't had a big issue with, oh, is this gross or weird, is because we just literally don't think about those things. We just say, how can I serve the church? And then the other things just sort of happened, which means you don't have to always second guess your motives, right? Because you were just serving the local church. And that's a huge gift in an age of great insecurity. And so I would say to a younger woman, do good work, and don't be so concerned about looking for opportunities to expand your range of your voice. But if you see something that would do that, and it's easy to walk toward as a part of what you're already doing, then sure.
Yeah.
But it's so much better if it's a byproduct.
That's really good.
When I think about your journey, I think about what opportunities were in front of you.
Yes.
Like, and you had relationships in the church, you had women who saw things in you and gave you opportunities to do things that you might not have decided. Like you taught a women's Sunday school class that you would not have sought out.
If she hadn't told me,
Yeah.
I need you to do this.
Yeah. And she was like, I need you to do this. And oh, by the way, I'm retiring and you're taking over the whole class. Right. And so,
for 8 years.
but again, it's like, what's in front of you and what can you do well and how can you,
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities that'll come for you to serve the Lord where you are. And then your giftings will lead you into new places. And so it's not where you have to go to the fully developed gifting and platform or whatever.
Right.
Just start where you are and do that well.
Do the work in front of you.
And then your giftings will come out in what you're doing. And the Lord willing, that leads to more and different opportunities.
I do remember when I started, like I was the women's ministry director and people always needed speakers for stuff. And I thought, could I ever put myself out there for, we would all call each other. The women's ministry directors would and say, who was good? Who can I trust? And I remember thinking, can I say I do this when I haven't done it? Like I've taught Sunday school, but can I say, oh, I can speak at your event? And I do think those moments do come for the woman who is like looking forward and wondering how to think through this. And you do sometimes have to say, oh, I'm a Bible teacher before you fully feel like you really are a Bible teacher, because we all carry around a nice dose of imposter syndrome. And so it does, like, I have a couple of women in my church who wanted to, they're like, I think I could teach more than I am. And I said, you know what, when they call you to do that MOPS program, you tell them, yeah, this is what I do. And then go knock it out of the park because you have done it. You've done it in your local church. Yeah. So there is some of that, like, oh, I can do this, but I have to call myself something that I don't feel like I am yet.
Yes.
And then step toward it.
That's really good.
There was a moment when you were speaking at One Lifeway where they came out and presented you with an award. And I think the thing that was so moving for me about that, and I can explain that to the audience, was that you were genuinely shocked. So they came out and said, hey, your studies have sold 1 million copies. And
Jen Wilkin cried like a little girl.
I mean, she had immediate emotion.
That's not hard.
But I love that because clearly what you're saying is confirming the truth. Like you have not been keeping up with it. Like, well, let's just make sure that I know how many things have been sold.
No, I came home and I told him what happened. And I go, were we supposed to know this? I was like, did you know this? He's like, I didn't know that. And so, but I do think at least for me and for us, I don't want my right hand to know what my left hand is doing, as much as that's possible. And so, no, we don't, it's not that we don't pay attention to anything, because you do want to know, oh, do I need to think about, there are aspects of it that you want to think about if you want to keep stuff in front of people. But no, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. It was sweet.
I think one thing I would say to younger people, something even a gut check for me is,
you're not younger.
well, thanks for calling that out.
Sorry.
Thanks for calling that out. People still call me a young leader.
I know,
Thank you.
I know.
Anyway.
Do you guys need a moment? Or
Maybe.
No, we're good. We're good.
Can we counsel you on how to navigate?
Yeah.
This?
You can counsel us and not relate because you've never had a fight. Teaching a room full of 25 engaged people is just as joyful as teaching a room full of 5,000 people. Like, there's not more joy that comes with a larger room full of people. What makes teaching fun is delivering content that you can tell is having an impact on people. Mm-hmm. So this idea that I'm not really something substantial or significant until I have a large room full of women who want to hear is it's an illusion that's just never going to be satisfied. Yeah. So I love what you said, like find those women in the church now that are hungry and enjoy feeding them rather than waiting for this big ticket.
Well, and when you get the big ticket, you lose something. You lose relational things. Like there's so much, such sweet, you can see the growth because you're having conversation around things. And it's not just, I'm going to talk and you're going to listen.
Yeah.
So
big
like
rooms.
Even now, the big room, I value it. I appreciate the privilege of it. But for me, there's loss, because while I try to maintain a dialogic feel like we're having a conversation, I'm always picturing my living room. That's just what I'm always picturing. And that's what I miss. And when we labbed the Revelation study in the dining room, some of the women who were there had been in the living room when that's where I taught. And it just was like, we all were just like, man, did we miss this? We just really missed this.
That's really good.
Jeff, I had a question for you. When Jen was on staff, we talk about criticism, and of course there's criticism on social media and all those things, but when it comes to like staff on staff relationships and she would be criticized, would she come home and share it with you? Would she shield you from that?
Oh yeah, she would share it with me.
Okay. And then what happens?
I mean, I think it's just, it's a lot of I'm cheering for you. It's a safe place to decompress and talk about what's happening. And there's shared frustration. There's also a chance to go, is that really what happened? Well,
Yes, I was deeply wrong.
You're getting one side of the story.
I feel like for me, a lot of what you do is you let me be the big version of it. Like I can say it however I want.
Yeah.
And then we let the dust settle, and then he helps me process through next steps.
That's good.
Yeah.
I know that she would not want you to go to bat for her necessarily with coworkers. Did you ever feel like you wanted to?
No, he did.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Yeah, back in the day.
Oh yeah. Well,
Is this a story you want to share?
No.
We will not be sharing.
Oh.
Jeff, I'm a little surprised at your immaturity on this. I've learned that if you tell a woman she's overreacting, it normally helps.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Just tell her you're making a big deal out of nothing. And if you'll just calm down.
He generally, I will tell in general terms how he went to bat for me. And he has done similar things for me, I feel like. I had a coworker who was basically calling my character into question. And the coworker invited him to go to lunch. So he was not on staff at the church. I was on staff at the church, and the coworker invited him to go to lunch to talk about the problem of his wife. And he called me and tells me, and I said, "Honey, you don't have to go to that lunch." And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to the lunch." And he did, and he said, "You're maligning my wife's character," and there's only so much that
I'm
we're
sure
gonna
that
put
meant a
up
lot
with.
to you.
It did.
Yeah.
It meant a ton.
That's awesome. Man, I want a Jeff Wilkin t-shirt. I'm telling you right now. I mean, this guy is an unknown jewel of the kingdom. Jeff, what's something about Jen that people don't normally realize about her? Or like, how does she come across that's really not her at all?
You're pretty goofy.
Say more.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, like our love language is wit in our whole family. And
Which
so,
never gets any of us in trouble.
right,
No.
Yeah. And so I don't, you're funny and you're self-deprecating and all those things on stage, but you're probably more so. The dogs have voices that you use. And they, have personalities that have been developed. And
So Jen has a dog language.
Yeah. Well, the whole family does, thanks
There's
to
an
my-
accent. We do the same thing.
yeah.
We have a voice.
Very
And since
good.
we have two dogs, they have these very colorful conversations with us.
Very nice. Very nice. That was a great answer.
You didn't
All right.
mention that I can rhyme like Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
Oh.
Kids. Yeah, I make up songs that rhyme in real time as I'm singing them.
Jen, what is something that Jeff has to do well because you are so bad at it?
Oh my gosh. I don't know where, if he were to, I don't want this to happen. If he were to drop dead tomorrow, I'd be like, do we have life insurance? I don't know. Do we have bank accounts? I don't. What are the passwords? I don't know. I mean, he's shown me where I'm supposed to go if that happens, but I don't know where that is. Yeah.
So he handles all the record keeping, all the books, all the
Yeah, we
accounting.
have I feel like we have pretty clear division of labor.
Yeah.
You're like, what do you do? What is your labor?
Yeah, I do all of it.
Well, the
Yeah.
funny thing is like when we first got married, I had always lived with people who handled the rent and paid the bills. And I lived in the dorm in college, and she's like, "You don't know how to pay the bills? Well, you're doing it." And so, that was like week 2 of our marriage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden,
And then we
it's
realized he cared way more about it than I did. And so
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it's yours.
It belongs over there.
Ben, I'll ask him to scan something in for me. You know, I'm like, hey, we need this document scanned in. And every time he says, let me just show you how to do it. And I'm like, there's no
No.
I don't
need.
want to know that.
I'm like, there's no need. I'm not going to do it as long as you're here.
But it's so easy.
If it makes you feel better. Yeah.
He does.
Oh, also grilling. I don't know anything about that.
Oh,
Yeah, I like to grill. What do you grill, Jeff?
I think my specialty is pulled pork.
Oh, very nice. I need to get
You
your
make
recipe.
Really good brisket too.
Okay. Yeah, the brisket's behind that, but everyone always votes for the pulled pork.
Weber
Very good.
charcoal. That's it.
Yeah. I'm old school. I'm a like third generation Weber kettle griller. And so I have just learned how to do all the things on that. And technology has changed, and
He has not.
I have not
Understand.
been willing to. It feels like cheating to move to something that might be easier. It's like, no, I know how
It
this
is
works.
cheating.
And we don't allow cheaters.
No, especially not justice-oriented women who shouldn't be pastors' wives
That's right.
like you.
Yeah.
I have one last question. This is a serious one. Jeff, when Jen was with us for dinner, I could see pain in her eyes about the closing of the chapter of being on staff. Like, it's really like, there was fear. Like, what is life going to be like not being on staff? God was closing that door. It was time for change. Like, what do you fear about this next season if Jen's not on staff? Like, what's that look like?
I'm afraid that she'll figure out how to be on staff again.
No. No. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, I had been saying, you are way too busy.
Yeah.
Like, your computer is open. I'm, watching Seinfeld reruns or whatever it is. And you're over there writing an article or answering email or,
I worked all the time.
No downtime.
Yeah.
And so to me, I'm like, well, it just gets back to kind of normal.
Mm-hmm.
And you still work a ton. So I'm like, I don't, when she was finishing Revelation, I'm like, I don't know how you were going to do that other job.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all the things you're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Wait,
Now it's more like it comes in waves.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah.
of like just the constant.
I
Yeah.
understand.
I had one more question, and it goes back to when you were on staff. So I know, Jen, that you talk about how it's really important to you that brothers and sisters in Christ that work together on a staff are good friends. They have good relationships together. And so much, you say this better than I do, but how there is a lot of division on staff, like the men hang out with the men and the women hang out with the women because there's fear that that something is going to go wrong within this staff. Did you guys have to talk about that? If you were to have a lunch with Kyle and JT or whatever, the perception of that to other people, I mean, were you guys okay with that? How would you advise other couples that are in this position now about that?
You mean in our marriage? Did we have
Yes.
to talk about
I mean, were you like, hey, Jeff, I need to have lunch with so-and-so or whatever? Is there just enough trust to where it was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I love you, you love me, we're good.
Yeah. Well, in the corporate world where I've lived, I worked with men and women, and we were just colleagues, and we'd go have lunch, and it was just no one thought twice about it.
Yeah.
And so, it's just one of those, are we overthinking this? I mean,
And I mean, I want to clarify, like, we don't just willy-nilly go have lunch with
Sure.
whosoever, that's not what's happening.
right.
But it is more of a sense of just, wait, do I only fear that an affair might happen, and I don't fear what we lose if we don't function as the family of God,
Yeah.
as brothers and sisters? And so I think that typically we've only feared one thing, and we think that is the greatest danger that faces us. And we would argue that, honestly, a greater danger is if brothers and sisters don't live as such in the family of God. And that, in fact, you actually charge relationships with something that they don't need to be charged with if you don't have a category for friendship. And, it's the culture that has said men and women can't be friends. That's not actually in the Bible. What the Bible says is the one another's are the way that we're to live. And I don't think it's saying that the men just practice the one another's with the men and the women just with the women. And it doesn't mean that we're not unaware of the fact that we inhabit a hypersexualized culture. We don't behave without keeping that as a reference point. We don't get to do whatever we want. But in an age that says friendship that any strong emotion for another human is sexual or romantic, the only place that we're likely to reclaim the beauty of friendship between men and women, or even between women and women and men is in the church. I think that's where it should be reclaimed.
That's really good. Well, we got to chase a lot of really good rabbits in this conversation. We were all over the map, and every part was interesting to me. I don't know how they're going to feel, but thank you guys for making time for this. I know finding time as a couple to do this is especially challenging. So thank you so much for being willing to share.
Sure.
Yeah, we were happy to. Thanks for having us on.
The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard, show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden, photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley, recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.